Welcome back, everybody. Today we are checking out a very different stock from the usual type of thing that I analyze. It is going to be Trump Media and Technology Group, ticker symbol DJT, and this stock is probably better known as Truth Social, the social media platform that Donald Trump is a majority owner of. Now, before we get too far into things, I just want to make sure that everyone knows this is not going to be a political video, but rather just something to analyze the absolute roller coaster that this stock has been and to kind of look at DJT as an actual investment vehicle and whether or not it is a good company to be investing in at all. So definitely buckle up. There's going to be some eye-opening analysis here, but before we get into any of the numbers, I think we need to hit the news first to really see why this is such a polarizing company. And what kind of video about DJT would this be if I didn't immediately show you the man behind the company? That is Donald Trump himself, and he is the main reason why this is such a polarizing company in general. In case you've been living under a rock, Donald Trump is the former president of the United States, and he is currently running for president again in the upcoming presidential election here in November of 2024. And let's just say Donald Trump is known for saying things off the top of his mind, very off the cuff, and he really doesn't care if he's offending anybody. And so there's a very large percentage of people who really like Donald Trump for that reason, and there's a very large group of people who do not like him for that exact reason. And so starting with the history of this stock, it started as Digital World Acquisition Corp, which was a SPAC or a special acquisition company designed to take public a private company of the ownership's choosing. And they decided to go with Trump Media and Technology Group, which was the owner of Truth Social, the Twitter-esque platform where people can share their minds and basically microblog about whatever they decide they want to talk about. And what is really interesting to know is that Donald Trump himself owns about 78.75 million shares of this new company, which represents 69.4% of the total outstanding shares. So Donald Trump himself owns almost 70% of the company, which obviously means that his net worth is very tied to this stock, as well as just general reputation and things of that sort. And ever since acquiring Truth Social, DJT has been absolutely volatile, one of the most volatile stocks in the market. And so, as this headline from Fast Company suggests, Donald Trump's net worth has been going crazy. And apparently I can't highlight this, but he stands to make $950 million in just one day of trading from Trump Media, and every single day we're watching Trump's net worth fluctuate by hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes even in the billions of dollars. But ever since the initial fanfare of the acquisition from DWAC into DJT has occurred and the extreme hype and blow off top that occurs in a lot of these SPAC companies, the stock has been losing a ton of value. And since its peak, at least on April 17th, the company had lost over $7 billion in value. And so we've seen Trump lose a ton of personal net worth, upwards of several billion dollars. In this case, one of the largest single-day plunges for Trump Media occurred when they planned to issue more shares to the common market. And as we'll see, the number of shares outstanding jumped significantly. So that is obviously a big reason why the shares would fall so heavily. But when we're talking about such a widely followed and polarizing stock, we can see why this would grab headlines so often. But the Donald Trump roller coaster is not over yet. Of course, the man knows how to put on a really good show. And so Trump Media has warned NASDAQ of suspected market manipulation. And if you were to read further into this, basically the Trump Media company is accusing short sellers in the open market of manipulating DJT by short selling the stock to an extreme measure, which we could argue the merits of that on an open market and whether or not that is something that is actually manipulating the market, but it is entirely legal. There's nothing they've actually done. Trump Media is just kind of upset about its recent performance, and I believe this is a way for them to kind of use the short sellers as a scapegoat for a company that's just obviously overvalued. But after accusing short sellers of manipulating the market, Trump Media has told its shareholders how to block their DJT stock from being loaned to short sellers. Now, what this does is, if a number of short sellers have taken these loaned out stocks and short sold against them, and then you decide not to allow your stock to be loaned out anymore, it's leaving these short sellers with positions that they need to cover because they no longer actually have the stock in their possession. They're no longer allowed to short sell it. So this is actually a really savvy move by the Trump Media organization, and ironically is more manipulative in the market than just pure short selling is, because they're telling their shareholders and giving them a direction to not allow this to occur. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that this is illegal, because they're just basically passing on information that any shareholder could figure out through like an internet search on how to make sure that their shares are not being loaned out. But it is very reminiscent of like GameStop, the GameStop mania, where we saw a number of short sellers heavily pile into GameStop, and then all of a sudden a small but zealous and effective group of investors, or apes as they eventually became called, decided to buy up a bunch of GameStop stock as well as options, and that forced a massive short squeeze, which it may appear to be starting in the DJT stock as well. As we've seen for the last couple of trading days, the stock is up, I think, something like 15 or 20% over just the last couple of days. And so that is like the briefest of refreshers on what has happened in the Trump Media Technology Group over just like the last couple of weeks. So before we get into the financial numbers and before I talk further about this company, can you please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as I really enjoy bringing these stock market type videos, and I can't wait to share more ideas and analyses with you. Thank you so much. And with that, let's go through these financial numbers. I do want to say that I'm going to breeze through these really quickly because, as you're going to see, there's not a ton of information on this stock. It's a very young company, and more importantly, it's not a very strongly performing company, so there's not much to say. As we can see right here, the annual revenue is at $4.5 million just in last year, which is up about 4 times where it was the year previous, but EBITDA is basically sitting at 0. The company has lost money over its entire existence. Operating earnings continue to get more negative. Gross margins are very high because it's just a technology platform, and so they're very good at converting their revenue to EBITDA, but their operating margin sucks. It's at negative 271% currently. As we just saw, the company loses a ton of money. Return on assets continue to get worse as well. And as we see here, the shares outstanding jumped massively following that recent announcement, I believe on the 17th of April. So before that, they were sitting at about 37 million outstanding shares, and that number jumped to almost 137 million. So when you see the share float increasing by about 100 million shares in literally one day, it's no wonder why the stock plunged so hard on this news, because there just clearly wasn't enough demand to absorb 100 million new shares hitting the market all at once. Moving on to the balance sheet, we can see that DJT has about $400,000 in debt, which is not a lot, but the company isn't very large, so you give and take. They have no outstanding long-term debt though, so that is a very good position, and this leads them to have a positive net interest expense, meaning they're earning about $14 million per year from cash that they have on hand. Levered free cash flow does look positive at 22.3 million, but if we look at free cash flow per share, that is still an abysmal number. And what we do see here is that on a per share basis, it looks like 2024 went from negative 14 cents per share to the trailing 12 months going to negative 4 cents per share. That looks like an improvement, but again, that's because of the number of shares outstanding. So because the shares outstanding nearly quadrupled, we're going to see the per share numbers also get cut into a quarter. So what looks like financial improvement is actually just the fact that there are way more outstanding shares, and so there's just more shares in the denominator of the equation, cash flow per share, which makes the number look smaller and therefore a little bit better when we're talking about negative numbers, even though in reality there is no actual improvement here. The company's price to earnings ratio has never actually been positive, and so there's really no information we can gather here. And because of that, it's very difficult to value this company, although I did put together a little comparison to its other social media peers to give you an idea of the kind of numbers that DJT should be putting up if we wanted to say that today the company was fairly valued at its most recent closing price of $36.38. And so in order to make those comparisons, I made a couple of charts, but before we can go over those charts, I want to go over some assumptions that I have made about DJT as a company in order for you to better understand kind of the math behind where these assumptions are coming from. So I took the share price today at the close of $4.18, which is $33.19 for DJT. I assigned an earnings multiple of a 20 PE to the company. Basically, to give it the benefit of the doubt, I generally start at a 15 PE, but let's just assume that this company reaches a 20 PE because it's growing quickly and it deserves a little bit of a premium because of the growth that it's experiencing. So if tomorrow the company was to be valued at a 20 PE instead of a negative PE, we would expect those earnings per share to be $1.66 per share. So if it has $1.66 per share of earnings trading at a 20 PE, then it would trade at a fair value of $33.19. So that's how I came to that number. Next, I need to take a slight detour and talk about the company that I used to come up with the following stuff down here. And I used Meta because Meta represents basically the best revenue per share to earnings per share margins in the entire market. So I wanted to give DJT the benefit of the doubt and basically say that this is going to be industry leading metrics that this company is going to have. So this really is a best case scenario for DJT that I'm assuming, but I don't want to just immediately assume the worst. So if we look at Meta's most recent earnings per share, it's $14.87. Their most recent revenue per share is $52.68, which means their revenue to earnings per share margin is 28.23%, or 28% of their revenues are converted into their earnings per share. What I then did is divided the implied earnings at 20 PE for DJT of $1.66 per share by that 28.23% to get the revenue per share of DJT required for it to be a quote-unquote good deal today, which would be $5.88 of revenue per share. This means that in order for DJT to be trading at a fair value today, it would have a revenue of $803 million compared to its actual revenue of $4.6 million. So what this means is that the price that DJT is trading at today is just absurdly high for what it actually is worth. These valuation multiples are so crazy, in fact, that DJT would need to see its revenue increase overnight by 174.33 times in order for it to be trading at a fair value come market open on Monday, which is obviously incredibly unrealistic. And this really just goes to show how much growth or mania or whatever is baked into the current valuation of this stock. And so now that I've zoomed out, here are the assumptions on the left-hand side. And the graph that we're currently looking at is the monthly active users of social media sites in the millions. And so we can see above and away, the most used social media site is Meta, or Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, which has 3.5 billion monthly active users. In second place comes Snapchat with 750 million active users. In third place would be Twitter if it was still a public company. These numbers came from 2022 with 550 million active users, and then Pinterest with 465 million active users. And in a very, very distant fifth place on this chart, we have DJT with exactly 1 million active users. Now I have to say this is an estimated number because DJT has not released this information as far as I'm aware, but I came across something online. It was a Google search if you want to find it yourself, but it was based on website traffic, and essentially what this company had found was that there's about 500 million visitors per month to DJT's Truth Social, but only about 1 million of them are actually users. The other 4 million are probably just people interested in what all this hullabaloo is about. So DJT has a ton of ground to make up if it wants to actually be considered a legitimate social media site. Next, I went ahead and looked at the average revenue per user of established social media sites in this left-hand graph, and I used that information to kind of come up with some guesstimates about where DJT should be in order to support the valuation that it is trading today. So on this left-hand graph, we can see the average revenue per user, or ARPU, of these established media sites. So there's Meta, which is above and away, again, the best, earning about $45 per user on its platform. Snapchat earns about $11.50 per user. Twitter in 2022 earned about $18 to $19 per user, and Pinterest with about $6.50 per user. Again, we do not have this information for DJT, but I think this is just a good chart to look at in order to see kind of the range of where its competitors are currently at. I do also want to note that these numbers are for the most recent reporting years for each of these companies, and they did not start at this number. Meta did not make $45 per user 10 years ago. They have to build to these types of metrics. So DJT will probably be way, way lower than these numbers for a while, and it will take DJT quite a long time to build to these types of mostly double-digit ARPU numbers. So moving to the middle graph, we can see the users needed on Truth Social to reach a quote-unquote fair value revenue at competitor ARPU. So essentially what I did to come to these numbers is I looked at the average revenue per user of each company. So Pinterest sits at $6.44 per user. Then I compared that to the required revenue for DJT to be considered fair value tomorrow, which is about $804 million in revenue. And I divided the required revenue by the average revenue per user to figure out how many users would be necessary on the platform to reach those statistics. And so essentially, the higher the ARPU, the less users are required. So if DJT had revenue metrics similar to its least profitable competitor, Pinterest, it would need approximately 125 million active users. In the most positive of outlooks, DJT would only need about 18 million active users, or about 18 times its current base, if it has ARPU numbers closer to Meta at about $45 per user. So even in the rosiest of outlooks, we can see that DJT is a really long ways off from getting to these numbers, and I do think 18 million users is something that is theoretically possible, but if we look at 42 million for the Twitter comparison, 70 million for Snapchat, or 125 million for Pinterest, I just don't think there's enough people, at least in the United States, that are interested in using another social media app, especially one that is just a knockoff of Twitter/X, and there's like 10 or 15 other competitors out there at this point, so it's a really saturated market, and I really only view DJT as an app that's used by like the most hardcore Donald Trump loyalists, Donald Trump fans. So is it possible for DJT to reach 125 million active users? Absolutely. Is it likely? I don't think so. And this final graph on the right really just shows that information from the middle graph in a slightly different way, which is showing the number of times that the user base of DJT and Truth Social needs to grow in order to match the $804 million of required revenue for DJT to be at a fair value today. So if ARPU metrics are like Pinterest, it would need to grow by 125 times, which obviously doesn't happen overnight, but even if it did happen over 5 years, that would still represent a growth of 162.5% annually for the next 5 years, which is just absolutely insane if that happens. To be like Twitter, the company would need to grow 43 times and would need to have an annual growth in users of 112% per year for 5 years. For Snapchat, the company would need to grow 70 times and have annual growth of 134% per year for 5 years. And even, again, under the rosiest of circumstances, DJT's user base would need to grow by 18 times. And so even if that occurred over 5 years, that would represent 78.3% growth per year for the next 5 years in Truth Social's user base, which I just do not see occurring. And so love him or hate him, I think we all need to admit that Donald Trump really knows how to put on a show. And so what I like about DJT and the Trump Media Group is that they have made a very fun stock to watch. I mean, it's been an absolute roller coaster going up, down, up, down, up, down. And this short-term volatility has been great for any traders involved. So if that's what you're doing and you like taking a lot of risk, DJT might not be a bad ticker to look at. But on the opposite side, I literally hate everything else about this company. From a financial metric, this stock is so overvalued. It's not even funny. Like, you can't actually put a comparable number to it. So I had to do all this other math just to show you how ridiculous the growth would need to be in order for this company to quote unquote be a fair value today. I don't think Donald Trump's media group is going to grow by 18 times overnight or even in the next 5 years. I just don't think there's enough of an interested user base out there for there to be 18 million monthly users on an app like this. And so as always, I need to say that this is not financial advice, but I will absolutely be avoiding this stock for any type of investment. It's so far off my radar, it's not even funny, but I will definitely continue watching DJT because it is honestly just entertaining, because who doesn't like a wild ride on a roller coaster? So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a bit different than usual. Please let me know what you think of DJT, what you think of videos like this. And please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, as it really means a lot to me and it tells me what kind of videos that you guys like to see. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video, which should be on your screen right now. Take care and goodbye.